The truth was simple. I wanted Ethan. Not just his presence, not just his quiet comfort. I wanted the way he made me feel. Desired, seen, alive. And in that wanting, I knew I was risking everything.